All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of In the Fighting Chair. This is our live stream broadcast that we started last year before all this COVID business, which has enabled us here at Living Sharks Museum to reach out to our shark community and give them a platform to speak about shark issues. We've been very fortunate to have some amazing guests on this show. And if you've missed any previous episodes, you can find them on our website, livingsharks.org, under the resources page in the fighting chair. Now, a little history, since it's 2021 and it's been a little while since we've done this, just to tell you how this came about. In the fighting chair is a play on words. The concept of the fighting chair, which of course not everybody knows, mostly the fishing community is familiar with this term, but the chair that fishermen might sit in and strap in tight to catch the large game, usually the sharks. And unfortunately, it gets that bad rap for its legacy of death. And we are trying to repurpose this concept. We're talking from the fighting chair to speak about conservation issues, talk about shark history, talk about sharks and entertainment. If you're interested in being on the show, feel free to give us a message through our contact form on the website. Again, that's livingsharks.org. But without further ado, I'm very excited to be able to introduce you to Bob and Pat Heyer, who are co-authors of the book Shark Attacks of the Jersey Shore, a history. This is a history press book. The true stories here, very, very well written. Very engaging, and if you haven't seen it, definitely take a look for it. You'll find it on Amazon, but we'll talk about other ways you can get it too here shortly. Let me introduce you to Bob and Pat Heyer.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome, Bob and Pat.
Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you for coming on. So we are experiencing some audio issues today, so you're going to have to listen closely to hear everyone speak. So we'll try not to speak over one another, and we're going to try to answer your questions as best as possible as well at the end of this interview, which will last 20 minutes to a half hour. And you can type in your questions through Facebook or YouTube right in the comments box, and if we can get to them, we shall. First, let's chat a little bit about how did this all come about? What was your first interest in sharks, Bob?
My first interest in sharks really started a few miles from where you are right now in Jamestown, Rhode Island. My godparents lived there, and I learned to snorkel and scuba dive at a very young age. I was fascinated with sharks. I grew up with Jacques Cousteau and, the whole early 60s, discovering the world under the water, and I just came to love them. I thought they were really interesting. Later in life, I collected sharks' teeth. I went to college to become a biologist, and I have taught marine science for many years, but it's always been sharks that have been the impetus of what, grew my interest from the beginning.
And how about you, Pat? Have you had any intimate experiences with sharks?
Well, not nearly as many as Bob, for certain. No, I taught for many years, and after retiring, one of the things I'm always interested in is writing, and I had written some books, self-published, on folklore and ghost stories from based on our local history, which is really colorful here on the Jersey Shore. And I got picked up by History Press, and using Bob's research on sharks, which has really opened a whole world to me about these beautiful creatures. That's how I came to actually write the individual stories for this book.
What I love about this content is that there's new information in this publication, some things that not many people are very familiar with. And it's an interesting story. Obviously, there are some Jaws connections here, which is actually probably going to be what brings a lot of people to view this interview today. For those of you who haven't seen Jaws, well, I don't know if we can speak, but Peter Benchley based a little bit of the story of Jaws on the shark attacks that occurred in and around the Jersey Shore in 1916. And during that period of time, being one of the hottest summers on record, it really shouldn't have been a very surprising event. But ultimately, it was the first time that sharks made national headlines. And that actually changed people's views on sharks very quickly, because that tends to be what the media does. So I love these projects that tend to fine-tune the details in the information to get the history right, because not everything that has been portrayed about the 1916 shark attacks has been accurate. And there's even still some debate about what the cause really was. You want to speak on that a little bit, Bob?
Well, for one thing, I think one thing that's never come out is many of the attacks were never included in it. It's become so rote to say the people who were attacked and when they were attacked. The attacks actually started the day before in Atlantic City, and the attacks didn't quite end when they claimed they did. Both of the sharks that were displayed as the possible culprits, one a bull shark and one a great white, a juvenile great white, both are pretty dubious. The one was the guy, Captain Cottrell, who found the one shark who was a culprit. He was a known huckster from the area. And the other one was caught by Barnum's taxidermist. And anything having to do with Barnum has to be a little bit suspicious as well. So, I mean, we're not really sure that the shark attacks ended when everybody says they did. In fact, there were two very, very credible attacks that took place the following week. And they took place just across the bay in New York City. And one of them has always been listed as unfounded. But the other one, there's no doubt about it. It was seen by many, many people, and sharks were pursuing people. Also, there were another series of, during that time, a boat was attacked in Seabright that nobody mentioned, knocked the people in the water. They had to tread water. So there was more to these attacks than never's been mentioned.
Yeah, it was really the summer of shark attacks, because they started initially at the end of June, and there were several attacks from Beach Haven, coming up through Spring Lake, in several towns. So there was that whole series of attacks, which culminated in, the massive problem in Mattawan. So like Bob said, there was a lot going on that particular summer on our shores.
And traditionally, it's either been a bull shark or a great white shark that's been involved. I think when you look at it, the reason for this book and the reason for this book comes from something called the New Jersey and New York Shark Attack File, which I started many years ago while teaching marine science. And the reason for this was to put together these facts so people could see them, and see that, there's more to this than just, as it is now, it's a good story. And several people have written some really nice books on the topic of the 1916 attacks. But everybody seems to be telling that same story over and over again. I first read the story years ago in an old book when I was young called Shadows in the Sea. And it's probably the best account I've ever read of the 1916 attacks because it's the most factual. It doesn't put a lot of speculation and add a little polish to it. And what they knew at the time, it had all those facts. And almost all the books since then have pretty much just been a rehash of those as the facts and not looked for any more new and empirical evidence. So what I've been trying to do over the years is find some new things and to add some new things to it to give researchers of the future a little bit more of a platform. Looking a lot like bull sharks to me is, to answer your question shortly, just because of when you look at the past incidents that have involved bull sharks in New York and New Jersey, and you look at the type of injuries, to me, it's just looking a lot more like bull sharks when you put everything together.
That brings up a great point too, and this is something that the media is guilty of, but even science can be guilty of as well. It's just putting a lot of focus on very specific periods of time, very specific incidents. It can actually inform the public in a very, isolationistic way and very, tunnel visioned way of looking at history, which, that seems to be the way we're changing things now, and new generations are rewriting history a little bit to include as much information as possible. So it doesn't have an agenda, we'll say. And I think it's very admirable work to be able to take a look at all the incidents with sharks throughout history on the Jersey Shore. And you're also working on another publication in another area as well, right?
Well, I've been gathering evidence on two things. Working on a much more in-depth study right now of the 1916 attacks that brings all the new evidence in. And I'm looking also in a shark conservation sense. Believe it or not, the whole purpose of my book and Pat's stories and making them human is that we want to save sharks. I think if you read it, what you're going to see is that sharks are not out to get us. And in almost all the instances, people were involved in some way or another in the attack. And I think that knowledge gives you, if you say, well, look, the very first attack in New Jersey took place when some boys were poking sharks, right? They're poking sharks with a stick, and then the kid gets badly bitten as a result of it. The poor shark's floundering in the mud. And, a lot of attacks have been along those lines, or somebody's been fishing and they're hauling a nice fish in, and boom, a large shark rams into the boat. I mean, people have a lot to do with it. And I think that by reading these stories, if you're out for guts and gore, this isn't the book for you. This is a book more of fact. I mean, what I want people to know is that it's probably the safest thing you can do is to go into the water. Millions of people go into New Jersey waters on any summer day. And if you go through this book, you'll see that there's so few incidents. And if you look at those incidents and take out of those all the ones that somebody was directly responsible for the incident themselves, and you're going to find that it's such a remote thing that sharks really are not something that we should fear. They're in much, much greater danger from man than we are from them. And so I spend a lot of time researching, and I'm very concerned with the illegal trade in sharks. A lot of the trade in sharks these days is in two products. It's in shark fins and it's in shark's teeth. And there's got to be a stop put to it. And one of the ways to do that is I'm doing some research and hoping to shine a light on different cultural uses of sharks that have made their way into the United States, especially into the New York area, and maybe enlighten people on some alternatives so that we don't have to, kill these animals to have these trinkets that people like to wear around their neck, or to a soup that really is flavorless and bland and does nothing for you, but people are cutting the fins off of sharks for in by the millions.
Sharks have always been these mysterious creatures beneath the waves. It's not like the creatures we see in the wilderness where we have full visual access. We don't know a lot about these sharks. And there's over 500 species of sharks worldwide. It's very tough to determine the cause of attack by most species. And there's so much information that we still need. This brings up a good point about language as well, in this term shark attack, which while it certainly attracts attention to the word,
incident.
it's incident. Incident is a much better word.
I use the word encounter many times in the book because, like you said, it wasn't necessarily an attack. It was many times a human, with the foibles that we undertake as human beings, doing really silly things, and understanding that when we're entering the ocean, we're entering their domain. That's not our domain, and being respectful of that. And so I always like to say, let's talk about the encounters, because I know the title says sharks because publishers like that word because it sells books. But I did emphasize the fact that it's human shark encounters for whatever reason.
Very important. Now, a lot of this information is available. You have a website as well for the shark attack file?
Yes, I do. It's available. It's used mostly locally by our lifeguards. A lot of our lifeguards are, in fact, I'm working with a lifeguard right now, captain of the lifeguards at Seabright, to develop a program for the whole state when it comes to early warning for dangerous marine life. But it's www.njsaf.com. It's the New Jersey Shark Attack File. And I just keep information there. You'll see that there's some posts there for specific for lifeguards when we have alerts during the summer. And there's things on how to investigate shark attacks there, things like that. And again, it's directed to a lifeguard audience, but anybody who likes sharks would probably find it interesting.
That's excellent. Definitely visit this website for more information. And I believe I also happened to catch some announcement of maybe a podcast coming up soon.
Well,
Yeah, we're
we're working on it. A little tech challenge, but
we're working on that one.
instead of a book for the 1916 attacks, what I'm really planning on is I'm going to start a podcast called In Search of the Real Jaws, in which I'm going to just try to explain and look and put out there all this new information on this 1916 attacks that I found, in hopes of getting some people stimulated to research this. It's a great area to research because, the more we know, we're seeing, up by you, especially in Massachusetts, the great white population has rebounded quite a bit.
Yes.
And the water's cleaner. We see it all the
Oh,
time.
sure, yeah.
Every time we're on the beach, the water's cleaner. We're seeing more marine life. We're seeing lots of it. There's going to be encounters, and we have to learn to live with these sharks. And so that's why I want to start really getting that message out there, especially here in New Jersey where the attacks occurred, that this is such a rare phenomenon. Let's find out. Let's see if we can't get to the bottom of this, and let's see what it was that caused this, and let's prevent this from ever happening again, so that we don't have to ever massacre the sharks by the millions or have people suffer the horrible effects of it. Lifeguards here are very, very good. They're doing a very good job, and they're very interested in learning, what we can do to protect the public, because the sharks are there. We're seeing them. We saw them last year quite a bit, and they're coming back, and we got to learn to live with them, because in this day and age, that's the good thing. In my day, I'm older, and when I grew up, people didn't have such a good idea of sharks. If there was a shark attack, you went into the water and you killed everyone you could catch. And that's not the way to do it. That does nothing. It solves nothing. The chances of catching the actual culprit are, minuscule. And the reason for the attack is the much more important thing. What was it? What happened? And, so we can prevent it. Prevention is the key. We need to prevent shark attacks, not respond to them wildly afterwards. But yeah, that's the podcast is going to be on the 1916 attacks.
That's excellent. We look forward to it. Coexistence is key. You spent a little bit of time studying shark tourism as well in South Africa, if I'm correct.
Well, I took coursework in South Africa and in Australia on marine guiding to become a guide in marine, certified guide for marine tourism. I think that tourism is the key. I really kind of think that tourism is the way that we can, just like they've capitalized on whales, I think us shark people, we need to be a little bit better at publicity. And, people are still really scared. I'd like to see things like shark festivals, during Shark Week, where towns actually celebrate their sharks. Why not have a shark festival in the town? But we've still got, our towns still are terrified of sharks around here. Local store, local clothing store had a great big shark sign as part of Shark Week, because they were selling Shark Week merchandise. And they wouldn't put it up because they were a beach town and they were afraid that it was going to scare people away. So we need to do a better job of PR as shark people, of selling our sharks to people as being worthy of tourism. I think a lot of people are interested in them, and I think a lot of people would like to see them. I just hope they don't want to see them on the end of a hook in the way that they've done it in the past. I'd much rather find other ways that we can enjoy the sharks.
I think you have to target in that respect also the media, because another thing that you see also in the book was that frequently the media would often not even report attacks, or many times would just say that the person had been injured by a floating log, or the one poor little child in Atlantic City had 200 bites, and they said he had scraped his leg on a log or something, because the minute
Or ton of
that
stitches,
stitches, and the minute that shark attack comes out, the hotel's empty, the tours run. So also, I think the media have to be somehow approached on how they present these, so that they're not hurting the local, economy, yet at the same time giving justice and fairness to the animals.
and being fact-based, I think is
And
a,
fact-based, good point.
Richard Garcia wants to ask if you've been cage diving, and if you haven't, where would you go?
No, but if I did, it would be for great whites. I would like to cage dive in South Africa for great whites. I think that would be like amazing. Uh, to me, they're the most magnificent creature on earth. I think when you think of a thing that's this big and it can live for as long as it does, and it just sits there and cruises the ocean, that's what I would most like to do is to cage dive in South Africa if I could.
How about you, Pat? Would you go in the cage?
Oh, he probably put me in the cage with him, so probably. Yeah, I'm not terrified of sharks because I respect them. And as I said earlier, the ocean is not my realm. So if I enter their realm, I have to do so with an appropriate amount of respect.
Some folks would like to know how they can help spread your message and spread the education that you're generating.
Well, I think the best thing that they can do, first off, is support anything that has to do with shark conservation. There are many good organizations out there now that are working. There's some of them on each coast that are doing things to protect sharks. They could volunteer. You don't have to give money, but you could buy, even if it's as much as some of them sell T-shirts, to buy a T-shirt to help them with their research. I think the more research that's done and the more that we can help support conservation research, the better it's going to be. The other thing I would say is, don't buy shark jaws and shark teeth. And, the reason for that, and I know everybody likes them and everybody wants them, and I did, believe me. And when I was younger, I had a shark's tooth around my neck and so forth. I still do, but now I use fossil shark's teeth, which don't cause a shark to be harvested, or I use replica shark's teeth. There's plenty of beautiful replicas out there and so forth that you can get and you can use. Nobody would ever know the difference but you. And you would also feel very, very good knowing that somebody didn't just kill this shark for that particular reason. Certain places, online auction places, are selling products. By all means, don't buy them. I've written to an online auction place several times because they're selling great weight products. And I would hate to see great whites go extinct because people want to have their teeth and just wear their teeth and keep them. By all means, if you enjoy them, there's plenty. The replicas are so nice. Get one. Get a great big replica for a fraction of the price and don't kill a shark for it. So again, to answer the question, I would support research and conservation. I would support reputable research, being people that you'll see online. There's a lot of great, up by you've got the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. I know I support myself. A lot of places that are doing great work, support them. And the second would be not buy a product that causes a shark to be harvested for it. And the other thing I would avoid is there's many places down by me, and I know Galilee used to have a big one up by you. They had these shark festivals where they would just catch these sharks and put them up. I would encourage these places to go to shark tagging as opposed to harvesting. You can catch sharks, that's fine. I think it's a great thing if you catch sharks, but by all means, there's no need to kill them. Why not tag them, release them, help science out? And science does have their tagging programs that anglers can get involved in. So, they're the kind of things that we could do to help.
These are all great points. And these folks would also love to see if there are any programs that could go into New Jersey schools in particular to teach kids about sharks and shark conservation that you could recommend.
Certainly could. I was a marine science teacher in high school for many years, and by far, the two topics were sharks and whales. I mean, that's what kids like. Kids like sharks. I had a lot of surfers. A lot of my students were from Allenhurst and were surfers, and they love sharks. They love to hear about them. But yes, I think a very good thing to do would be to get more shark education in schools, marine education in general. Not all school, here we're on the coast, so we do teach marine science in most of our schools. But marine science is applicable even in the middle of the country. I mean, no matter where you are, a knowledge of marine science is very important. And by all means, sharks are always a good part of that. the kids love them. We one of the first things I did was we used to dissect sharks when I took over the class years ago, and they killed dogfish by the thousands. We stopped that. There's a lot you can do, to you can do virtual dissections and stuff these days. But yes, absolutely. Let's get it in the schools, not only in New Jersey, but everywhere. Marine education is very important. I was an educator as well.
I think it's important for our audience to also realize, no matter what age you might be, there's always something you can do. The science is still evolving. Not everything has been discovered. That was something I thought when I was young, and I kind of went my own way. Well, we already know everything about everything. So what am I going to be able to contribute? Well, that one a different way, obviously. But I think it's really important to know that, if you have an interest, if you hold an interest, and especially for the right reasons, there are people out there that are willing to help, especially nowadays with technology. There's ways to network and connect and share information. And you bring up a good point. There's a lot of established organizations out there doing some of this work already. So definitely give them your support. And Bob and Pat, I really want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. I hope everybody goes out and finds this book. You can find it online, of course. I believe you can find it on Amazon.
Yes.
And
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes
definitely
and Noble, Amazon, or at History Press.
Yeah, and all the major bookstores carry it.
make sure, of course, that you visit their website, njsaf.com. To hear a little bit more about the projects that are up and coming. Thank you so much, Pat.
Thank you.
They can feel free to write us too. You can write through NJSAF, and we'll be glad to answer any questions if we didn't have time.
Well, stick around. We're going to chat a little after. If any other questions come in, I'll send them along, and we'll try to get those answers out to those folks in due time. Again, thank you so much, and hopefully we get to chat soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was another episode of In the Fighting Chair. Really amazing to be able to have these great guests on this show. If you have some ideas for this show, some folks you'd love to see on our show, definitely send your suggestions to us, and we'll see what we can do about bringing folks on. Again, we really love talking about conservation. We love talking about the facts. So definitely tune in next time. Keep an eye out on our website and in our newsletter for our next guests upcoming, which will be announced very soon for the next episode coming up in 2 weeks. Thank you all for watching. My name is Keith Cowley, curator here at Living Sharks Museum, and we'll see you next time.